Tim, I just asked you in another video about, is the data warehouse dead, basically? And in that answer, you made me think of another question. Tell me about you can talk technical stuff all day long. We can take out the Kimball book and talk about facts and dimensions and best practices. But that's the easy part. Let's talk about what are some reasons warehouse projects fail from the human factor. You had a blog post about that recently. Actually, I liked. Let's just talk about that.
Yeah, so I did have a blog post about that. Very often, the reasons that data warehouse projects fail, in fact, most of the time when they fail, it's for non-technical reasons. It's not that the technology is not up to speed. Failure to communicate, failure to adequately prepare, failure to define what it is that you want the end product to look like. I've helped a lot of clients out through projects where they start a data warehouse because they want a data warehouse. Because without defining what success looks like.
Everybody else has one.
Right. Everybody else has one. We should be putting data into a data warehouse. But they don't really go to the end and figure out what does success look like. And you see a lot of that because they're trying in earnest to get things started, get the ball rolling. And you don't want to get into analysis paralysis where you're building this thing, but all you're doing is planning to build this thing and you're not really building the thing. But the other side, the other cutting edge of that is that you don't want to get in too soon without figuring out where do we want to go. Because otherwise you're a ship on the ocean without any sort of guidance.
Let's turn that around, right? So I bet you people are watching this video, I hope, and I bet you some of these people have been involved in a failed warehouse project. Or right now they're building a new data warehouse because the last one they built is filed in that circular file. They spent $800,000 on the team of consultants. They've thrown it away, and now they figure out what do we do. So what can they do? Is it impossible to have a successful warehouse project? What can they do? What are some tips and tricks?
So a lot of data warehouse projects fail. It's a really big project, and unfortunately there's a lot of moving parts, business and technical. But just because it's failed or stalled doesn't mean it's got to be thrown away. Because almost anything, if it's still got business value, almost anything can be survived or it can be revived, rather. So certainly the first thing is figuring out where you are, and then figuring out where you want to go. That sounds overly simplistic, but in trying to get a project moving forward, those two things, the fundamentals, are often the things that you forget. Because you try to jump in and, we need to write some code. We need to do some this. We need to generate an ERD. When really you need to figure out, we don't know where we are. We don't know where we're going. And those are the two most common things that will get you off track, is not knowing what your current status is and not knowing what direction you need to go. So reviving it, first and foremost, is a matter of defining where you are and where you want to go.
What's a good way to start a warehouse project? There seems to be there's, for lack of a better description, there's the waterfall approach, right? Where you start, you have this monolithic requirements gathering phase. You spend 6 months talking about data and talking about it, and then you finally start analyzing your source systems and report. And then there's that agile, for lack of a better word, way where they maybe pick a subject area and pick a report and say, let's build for that. Is there a better way? What do you find more success with?
So I find that if you can find small deliverables, so it maybe mimics what you were describing, but finding smaller deliverables rather than trying to do the whole thing at one time. One of the common traits that I've seen in failed projects is trying to do everything at one time. We're going to build a data warehouse and we're going to deliver the entire data warehouse as one unit. And that's a solution that's prone to failure. Because if you try to do too many things at one time, not only are there technical barriers to doing that, just getting the ETL right is a big challenge, but getting people used to going from getting data from here, from these sets of reports, to changing and quite literally in one day, going over to the new system. That can be problematic because every business process that touches the data warehouse, from what feeds it to what cleans the data to how they're consuming the data, all that changes at one time with a big bang approach. What I typically try to do is carve off, let's figure out what the essentials are. What's the raw essentials, or what's going to be common to most of your reports, most of your analysis. Let's carve that out. Let's get something that's proven to be working. Look at it as kind of an advanced POC. Where it's a proof of concept, but we're going to take it all the way to the end and show this is what this fundamental, the MVP, or the minimally viable product looks like. Once we get that and it's got some maturity, add on another subject area, and so on. It takes more effort than doing it at all one time because you're slowly sort of doing the same things over and over again. but it's a more proven approach because you're not depending on this one time all or nothing. It either succeeds or fails. You've got some room to fail smaller rather than failing one time really big.
Sure. Probably gets easier to visualize success, right? You've seen, hey, this worked. Like the warehouse is no longer this big, scary, monolithic. Where the heck do I start? It's now, hey, you're running reports and analytics right now on real data. So now it's probably easy to get adoption that way too, I think.
Yep. So if it's already working with a smaller set, let's add on, if we're doing this for financials, let's add on patient care, let's add on manufacturing or whatever your critical subject areas are.
Great.
And then slowly add those on. User adoption works well in that as well, because once they see one small part of it that's not only working, but the data is validated and they trust the data, they'll be your drivers behind that process of getting everything into the warehouse.
That's great. You know, it sounds silly, right? But data warehousing, and you watching probably know this too, right? Data warehousing sort of feels like a 4-letter word someplace. Like when I talk to people, I'll go to clients, and I don't do as much of the warehouse design. I do some, so we overlap a little bit there, but I'll see them doing reporting off of an operational database, and they're doing all this crazy work and views and temp tables and convoluted work just to be able to report on, to denormalize their data. And they'd be better off in a warehouse. But I get nervous saying that word to clients because I always feel, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Is it you? Like, I fear that when I say that, people think I'm some evil consultant trying to get $4 million out of them and have a project never finishes. Like warehousing seems like a scary. Is it just me? Or do you find that too sometimes?
So I haven't run into that. I've run into a case we talked on an earlier video about there's a small but prevalent opinion in some circles that the data warehouse is dead.
Sure.
So if you're selling a data warehouse solution or you're selling data warehouse services, some small segment of the population looks at you as that's old school technology. You need to be doing Hadoop. You need to be doing big data. Those are complementary things. So it doesn't render the data warehouse irrelevant, and it certainly doesn't make into, for lack of a better word, a shyster. People who are doing data warehouse work, because data warehousing is still a part of the solution set that you'll use to get insights into your data.
At the end of the day, it's a repository of data that can easily answer questions, right? I mean, that's what you call it whatever the heck you want. That's what it is, right? Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Good stuff.